IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It's Monday. It's June 5th, and Notre Dame just wrapped up their first big official visit recruiting weekend of the 2024 class. Notre Dame had several visitors on campus today. We're going to talk about that. We're going to do a mailbag today as well. I see somebody asking in the chat. I don't know how many questions we'll get to since it's a solo show today, but I know you all have a lot of questions. Easiest way to get a question seen, since I'm going to be trying to do the show and work in the chat and starting questions, so it'll be a little harder to do. Obviously, put the MB on there, which helps things stand out a little bit, but also if you get a super chat, it automatically gets starred. So I'll be able to see those as well. So we'll try to get to as many of those as we possibly can during today's show. But we're going to talk about the weekend visitors for Notre Dame, the players that were on campus this weekend, how things went for Notre Dame. And then we'll dive into a little bit of a small preview for this upcoming weekend's visitors as well. It's going to be a bigger list, but a very important list as well. So let's just dive right into it. So Notre Dame had their first official visit weekend of the year, of the cycle this past weekend. Was not a very big list of players, and I think that was intentional. I'm going to dive a little bit into why I think they did what they did this weekend with specific players on campus. Number one, I think when you look at the offensive linemen, they had 4 offensive linemen on campus this weekend, 2 commits, Peter Jones and Anthony Knapp, and then they had 2 uncommitted players on campus this weekend on the offensive line. That would be Xavier Lambert and Styles Prescott, who are the 2 top players on the board for Notre Dame. When it comes to the offensive line, I think that's sort of the dream finish for Notre Dame when it's clearly to be get Styles Prescott and Xavier Lambert. And I think they had those 2 kids on campus for a reason. Number one, it's important. Offensive linemen, we've talked about this in the show before. Offensive line is a different animal for recruiting. And there's relationships are important for almost all players or all positions, and some individual players it's not as important, but offensive line, it tends to be a very, very important piece for almost all the players. So first and foremost, getting Styles Prescott and Xavier Lambert on campus the same weekend as Peter Jones and Anthony Knapp was important for Notre Dame. I think that was certainly a success. I think getting them on campus the weekend of the Irish invasion and the lineman camp was important as well, because you get a chance to see Joe Rudolph in action, which I think is a very important piece of this as well. And we've talked a lot about Joe Rudolph's recruiting and kind of what he needs to do to sort of silence some of the criticisms, and it's landing these 2 players. And, he's started this process out a little bit behind the 8 ball because he was new to Notre Dame. He hasn't had the long period of time to develop these relationships with the young men at Notre Dame like other coaches have at their, at the schools that they're at. And so this weekend was going to be important. We talked about it last weekend. There was even some questions about when Xavier was even going to come. He had said he was going to come the 3rd weekend. Notre Dame wanted him to come the 1st weekend, ends up coming the 1st weekend. And so they had those 2 players on campus. So it was important that there was a strategy behind wanting him to be on campus this weekend that had really nothing to do with wanting to be first. Or I shouldn't say nothing. It didn't have as much to do with being first as it did with just getting on campus the same weekend as the other offensive linemen, getting on campus the weekend of the lineman camp, so you could see Joe Rudolph in action, because that's a really, really important aspect of this. They also had safety Paul Menke on campus this weekend for an official. Anthony Robinson is Paul Menke's from Texas. Anthony Robinson is from Louisiana. He was on campus this weekend. And then, of course, you had Kedron Young, running back Kedron Young, who you all know I'm extremely high on in the 2024 class. And I think that was part of timing as well, because when you look at Notre Dame's running back board, that we've talked about this for a while, they won a 2nd running back in this class. That's not a surprise to anybody. And Xavier Lambert's I keep saying Xavier Lambert. My apologies. Kedron Young is the guy that they viewed as the top target on the board at running back. And so I think when you looked at how the board was developing, Notre Dame liked Anthony Carey a lot. I don't know if the interest was quite as reciprocated, and so it really came down to Kedron Young and Xavier Robinson. Well, you've got Xavier Robinson coming in on campus on Wednesday. Again, I think it's intentional. I think the intention being, I believe this to be the case, the intention being bring your top target in on Monday, because your second target is a guy that you feel pretty good about landing. And so I think that was a wise strategy by Notre Dame to bring your top target in and get a gauge on where you stand with him and see if you can maybe help solidify things. So I think there was strategy involved in that as well. And then the reason why this first weekend was so small is partly also because of the fact that you had the camps. You could bring players in for the weekend of the camps, but you had to be careful that you didn't bring in too many players for the weekend of the camp. And so the Irish Invasion camp and then the lineman camp. And so I think that was wise strategy by Notre Dame. So there was certainly some strategy, or not say strategy, there was certainly some thought behind who they brought in and when they brought certain players in. So let's dive into how it went. And let's start with the offensive lineman. I'm going to start with Styles Prescott because he's a guy that his recruitment has been interesting to follow. Notre Dame, Harry Hiestand offered him back in January. This was, I think, the first batch of on the road visits that Notre Dame had that were focused on the 2024 class. And Coach Hiestand went down to his high school and had a chance to do some digging into him, and they watched the film, studied Styles, and Coach Hiestand liked him and offered him a scholarship. And from that moment on, Notre Dame was considered the leader for his recruitment. I mean, they were the team to beat, really, from the beginning until now, the team to beat. Came in town for the blue gold game as well. Things went extremely well. We had some rumblings and some sources that have said he was very close to committing that weekend. We actually all thought that he was going to commit that weekend. He decided not to, wanted to let the process out. And Styles strikes me as a kid who's very thoughtful and wants to make sure that he's making the right decision and not rush into a decision. That certainly factored into his decision to not make any commitment after the blue gold game and not kind of get caught up in the emotion and the moment of that. So, but Notre Dame has just continued, and this is one Joe Rudolph has done a really nice job on, as the transition from Harry Hiestand to him. He did a really nice job of building the relationship, staying on the relationship, not putting pressure on Styles. Just still, hey, look, we want you. Here's the deal. Chad Bowden's been involved with this, and Jared Parker's been involved with this one. So it's really been a group effort. But getting him on campus this weekend was important because I think you needed to capitalize on the momentum that you had in this recruitment. Talking to different people, different sources about how it went this weekend, I don't know that it could have gone really any better for Notre Dame when it comes to Styles Prescott. I think the aspect of it that really was impactful, look, he's talked to the coaches a lot. He's been on campus plenty of times. I think the key things for Styles, and I'm going to say similar things when I get to Gary Lambert, was getting around the other two committed linemen and getting around the current lineman on the team. That was vitally important in this visit. And the reason, because again, in a lot of the one-day visits, like the Blue Gold game, for example, you're not spending a lot of time really getting to know the lineman. You may be around them for different things, but you're not spending a lot of time just really asking tough questions because for the blue gold game, for example, they've got a game to prepare for. You're only there one day, and so you look at the importance of an official visit is you get 3 days. I mean, you get in Friday, you leave Sunday. You've got basically 3 days, 2 full days, but parts of 3 days to really have them do a lot of different things, and that was incredibly impactful for Styles Prescott and being able to get around the linemen, get to know the players he's going to play with. Because as I've said today, and I've said in the past, and I think everybody knows this, for linemen especially, the relationships with the players you're going to be playing beside is vitally important. And I think that Notre Dame getting a chance to have Styles on campus this weekend at the lineman camp with the other commits, with Gary Lambert, was very important. So how did Notre Dame do? And they crushed it. I mean, they did a tremendous job in this recruitment. I don't see this one lasting a whole lot longer, and I don't see a situation where anyone's going to be able to overcome Notre Dame. I don't know. I don't know that if I could go back and say, hey, what could you have done better or worse in this recruitment? I don't know if there's a lot Notre Dame could have done. Now it's just sit back and wait for him to make his final decision, which I think is going to happen sooner rather than later with Styles Prescott. So I think Notre Dame has put themselves in a great position with Styles Prescott. The other lineman they had on campus this weekend was Gary Lambert, and this was a big one because I think coming into the weekend, we all felt with Styles Prescott, it was a matter of when, not if, he would commit to Notre Dame, and that's still true. when it comes to Gearby Lambert, his recruitment has been much more of a steady roller coaster, or much more of a roller coaster, whereas Gearby's been Styles has been pretty steady. Offered him in January, and just continued to build that relationship. Other schools got involved, but nobody could ever catch Notre Dame in Styles recruitment. So it was a pretty steady recruitment. With Gearby, it was really up and down. When Harry Heastan offers him, he obviously he's very familiar with Harry Heastan's reputation. Coach did a really good job early on of putting Notre Dame in position to where they were the leader very early on. It was very clear that they were the leader. I think when Coach Heastan left, it kind of shook things up a little bit for Gearby. And you've got a new offensive line coach coming in. You don't really have a relationship with him. You're not in a situation where you have the connection. There's not the past where you recruited him somewhere else. Now you're at Notre Dame. You had to start over from scratch. And I think during that time, Ohio State was able to really make a move with him. Michigan was able to make a move with him. Penn State was able to make a move with him. And it got to the point where the last month, all of my sources around this recruitment were like, I don't feel great about it. We got a lot of work to do. And obviously you're in the game, but you don't feel good about it. And they just kept plugging away. And they were able to finally convince Gearby to get on campus. And a lot of things I said about Styles are very true of Gearby, but they were even more impactful, getting around the current offensive linemen, getting around the current commits. But more important, really important part of this trip was getting some face time, some one-on-one time, some quality time with Joe Rudolph. Ultimately, that was going to be the thing that is going to allow Notre Dame to win this recruitment or not, is going to be the relationship with Joe Rudolph. And I think when you look at the job that they did this weekend, folks, I really don't know if I could. Other than just him coming out saying, "Hey, I'm committed," I don't see how this weekend could have gone any better for Notre Dame. I think a lot of the question marks that Gearby had coming into the visit were answered. I think the connections that he was able to build this weekend are strong. And this is a kid who loved the Notre Dame at one point in time, but I don't believe has ever been to campus. And so getting a chance to be on campus, seeing firsthand all the things he's heard about Notre Dame from the coaches, from his teammate Boubacar Traore, from some people that he's played against during his career. I think it was an important opportunity to really build that connection. And I think that Joe Rudolph was able to answer a lot of those questions, alleviate maybe some concerns that might have been there. I don't know if they were even outward concerns. Like he could say, "Hey, this is what I'm concerned," but just concerns in regard to just, "Hey, what's the relationship like?" I know what the relationship is like with some of the other people and all these different aspects of it. But with Notre Dame, what's the relationship like? And Notre Dame absolutely did a phenomenal job with Gearby Lambert. So to the point where right now he's still going to take his visits. I believe he has an Ohio State and a Boston College, and I believe a Michigan visit. It could be, let me check that here real quick while we're talking. It's either Michigan or Penn State visit also coming up, but if it's Penn State, I don't know that visit's going to happen now, because Penn State just took, I believe, their 5th offensive lineman this weekend. So yeah, he had a visit scheduled for Penn State the weekend of June 23rd. I won't be shocked if Gearby decides to maybe go to Michigan that weekend instead, potentially, although Michigan also is another team that's filling up a little bit. So he's going to go to Ohio State this weekend. And honestly, Boston College is not a school I'm worried about. Penn State is not a school I'm worried about. Michigan's not a school that I'm as worried about. But it's Ohio State, and he goes to Ohio State this upcoming weekend. And I think that's going to be big for Notre Dame. So they've put themselves in great position, folks, to the point where I would say my read of the situation and some of the things that I've heard from different sources is that I believe that Notre Dame is now the leader for Gearby Lambert. So they completely did a 180 in this recruitment. Now, here's the key moving forward, because he is going to take his visits. So you all know what that means. He's not committed to Notre Dame if he's taking visits. And so you've put yourself in pole position. Now the key is coming out of the visit. What are you able to do to solidify the relationship? You can't just not talk to him for the next week heading into the Ohio State visit. You've got to have some communication in the next week. You've got to have communication coming out of that visit. You've got to make sure that you do not lose any of the momentum that you were able to get this weekend. because I think Notre Dame did as good of a job as you could possibly imagine with Gearby Lambert this weekend. And so I feel really good about where things stand with him. Let's move over to the defense, and we'll finish with Kedron Young at the end before we get into the preview of the upcoming visits for the week and a couple of visits that are happening now. Paul Menke's visit, the kid from Cibola, Texas, goes to Samuel Clemens, same high school as Colin Hill, for those of you who remember. He had 4 visits set up for the month. He's got a visit to Notre Dame this weekend. He's also got Duke, Stanford, and Washington coming up. Notre Dame it's been an interesting recruitment. So Paul visited Notre Dame, I believe, in April, and this was a couple weeks after he got his visit, an offer from Notre Dame. Visited, liked it. Things went really well, but it was still early in the relationship. So, both sides kind of had to learn about each other. And I think they've done that. From all accounts, from what I've heard, the visit went extremely well. I think that he likes Notre Dame a lot. I think that he fits the defense well. I think the problem, however, is that he is going to take all of his visits. He's going to take his next 3 visits. And I know that Notre Dame likes Paul Menke, but they like other players too. And he's not a guy that is a take no matter what guy. He's not a guy that you tell other guys that you like. You're not going to tell, obviously, Bronte Johnson. You're not going to tell Oliver Miles. You're not going to tell Malcolm Ziegler, who are visiting over the next couple weeks, no to wait on Paul Menke. So it's an interesting situation where I think he likes Notre Dame a lot. I think Notre Dame is the school that he likes the most. I just feel like by the time he gets to decision-making mode, Notre Dame could be full because there's a lot of movement when it comes to safety recruiting for Notre Dame. And so that's a recruitment that is going to be very interesting to watch. But I feel like Notre Dame has done a very good job in that recruitment. And as long as they don't fill up before he's ready to commit, I think that Paul Menke likes Notre Dame quite a bit. Last recruitment we're going to talk about from the guys that have completed their visits is Kedron Young from Lufkin, Texas. I think you all know by now. If you don't know if you're new to the channel and you're not sure my feelings on this young man, this is a kid that I've been very high on for some time. I believe Notre Dame offered him. Actually, let me look up his. Let me look up his what I have on him here real quick. I believe that Notre Dame offered him back in, I believe, January. I just want to look up the specifics of him because I don't want to give you all bad information. I believe Notre Dame offered him in January because he's been on the board for a while. So he got offered by Notre Dame, yes, January 31st. And immediately Notre Dame became a top contender for him. If you're not familiar with Kedron, his mom is an educator. She's a teacher. I believe I just saw her post something recently about her being a teacher of the year at her high school. Comes from the kind of family you expect to like Notre Dame, a family that obviously football is important, but there's other things to consider. Very polite young man. I've been able to engage with Kedron a little bit. I like this kid as a young man. I think he's a really good fit for what Notre Dame does, but I should say more importantly, but more specific to the topic at hand, he's a heck of a football player. If you haven't seen him yet, 5'11", 210, maybe 215, really nice feet, athletic player, really good vision, second level anticipation, really hits holes. He's decisive as a runner, and he's got speed. Somebody in the chat said that he's a faster Audric Estime. I can't disagree with that. I really don't. He's not as big as Audric is or was, but he's similar. Audric's a little taller. This kid is a really dynamic player and a great complement to where you're looking for in this running back class. So he's a guy that coming into the visit was your top back, the guy that the staff wanted to combine with Aeneas Williams in this class to give them a really, really potentially impactful one too. But he'd never been to campus before. So anytime a kid has never been to campus, there's always that some kids are going to love it and some kids are just, it's not for me, especially kids that are coming from out of state. So talking to different people, Kedron absolutely loved his visit. Notre Dame did a phenomenal job here. Now, Dylan McCullough has really been putting a lot of work for months on this relationship and really trying to overcome it. Because I do think Kedron liked Notre Dame from the moment they offered him, but I don't know that they were necessarily like a school that immediately jumped to the top of the board. When you look at Kedron's list of schools he's visited and plans to visit. He has officials set up to Texas A&M. He has an official set up to TCU. He's been to UTSA. I mean, he's a kid that has I believe from talking to him, I think Baylor was another school he was going to visit. He was going to visit Texas Tech as well. So one of these is not like the other for the schools that he's looking at visiting, right? Notre Dame is not like all the other schools. All the other schools are Texas schools. So they needed to really build up that connection and really build up that relationship. And Dean McCullough did a great job with that. As he's done from the moment he arrived in Notre Dame, he has done a tremendous job of selling Notre Dame and selling the vision for what this young man can do in the offense. And so I think Notre Dame did a tremendous job of getting him comfortable. I'm not 100% certain on this, but I believe Aeneas Williams was also on campus this weekend. That was my understanding, and I don't know if he definitely showed up, but I know that he was supposed to be here this weekend. I'm actually going to look that up real quick and make sure that see if I can find if he did officially come this weekend or not. But he was supposed to come this weekend, and if he did, it would make a lot of sense because you really want to make sure that those kids are on the same page. Because yes, you want to get Kedron Young, but you also want to get Kedron Young and keep Aeneas Williams in the class as well. And I know Notre Dame is very high on both of those players. So I think getting those two on campus together, if they were able to pull that off and actually get Aeneas on campus this weekend is going to be important. So I think Notre Dame did a tremendous job here. They did an excellent job of getting him, selling everything is important to him, his mother. And I would argue that coming out of this visit, Notre Dame is the clear leader for Kedron Young. I think they put themselves in a position that nobody's going to be able to catch them at this point in time. We'll see. Things happen. Things always change on the fly. But I think the Notre Dame put themselves in a great position with Kedron Young. So I feel great about where things stand with Kedron Young right now coming out of the visit as well. Those are the official visitors that are on campus already. Have finished, I should say, have their visits are now home. But there's also a young man that showed up yesterday as the other visitors were on campus, and that is Bronte Johnson. Now, his visit is, I believe, until tomorrow. He started yesterday. I believe he's going to stay until Tuesday. It's a normal length of a visit. Notre Dame, this is another one where so far so good for Notre Dame. I'm not going to talk too much about it because his visit's not over yet, and you always want to wait till it's completed. But I think we know where this one's headed. Bronte is a kid who I have a great amount of respect for. We all know he's a very good player, tall, long, fast, athletic, instinctive, plays receiver, plays safety. He's very good at both. Safety is where Notre Dame is recruiting him. They offered him last summer after the Irish Invasion. Very talented player, had a great Irish Invasion workout last year. I was able to actually be at that one, and I thought he did an excellent job. Liked Notre Dame a ton. He was here for the March, the junior day. I think it was in like late January, junior day. And obviously Notre Dame was the school to beat. There were some things that came up academically that made it look like it wasn't going to happen with Bronte. And there was work he needed to do to be considered a guy that Notre Dame could go after. And from all accounts, he did that work. And so he went from kind of a guy that you liked, but you didn't think you were going to be able to get, to now a guy that is much more of a player to be at Notre Dame. And so I love the fact that the kid put in the work. He kind of just shot up my list of favorite kids when you do that, because there's a lot of good schools recruiting Bronte, and he could easily just say, forget Notre Dame, I'm going to go somewhere else. But he didn't. He's done the work. So this visit's going to be important towards trying to wrap things up. And that's what Notre Dame's trying to do, right? That's what they're trying to do with Styles. That's what they're trying to do with Kedron Young. That's what they're trying to do with Gearby Lambert. That's what they're trying to do with Bronte Johnson. They're trying to wrap these recruitments up. And we'll know for sure later once the visit is complete. But I think coming into this visit, Notre Dame was in a great position. And so far, they've done everything that they need to do to really answer some of his questions and then for them to get some of their questions answered about where things stand with Bronte and the work he has done and will be willing to continue to do. Just a reminder, we will be doing a mailbag at the end. So if you all have any questions, feel free to go ahead and get those in there now. We have a few of them started already, so we'll get ready to rock and roll with those. So Bronte's on campus now. Davis Andrews is also supposed to be on campus this week. Now he tweeted out today that I'm gonna look at the tweet again, but I got the impression he was already on campus. Yeah, he's flying to Notre Dame today. So I don't know if his official visit is going to start today or tomorrow, but it was scheduled to go from tomorrow to Thursday. Sometimes kids fly in the night before, but he's obviously been to UCLA recently. They're a major player for him. Utah, BYU is a major player for him. And Notre Dame continues to put themselves in a great position. I think it's going to be a battle for him. This visit is going to go a long way towards shoring things up. But here's where it gets interesting. There's always been a potential for him to take a Mormon mission for 2 years before he comes to college, or go to college for a year and then take a 2-year Mormon mission, which we saw with Kahanu Kia recently. I believe right now, and again, we'll have more clarity on this by the time his visit is over, but I believe the plan as of right now is that he is going to be someone who takes the Mormon mission before he starts college. That means if that in fact happens, that would almost make him a 2026 recruit. So I'm not sure how that's going to go in that regard, but I do think Notre Dame wants him. And my understanding is that Notre Dame has told him, we'll take you however it works. If you want to come here for a year, then go on a mission, cool. If you want to go on a mission afterwards, cool. If you want to go on a 2-year mission, then go to college, cool. The moral of the story is Notre Dame wants this kid, and they want him to be a part of the class, and they're going to put in the work to do so. So I think with him finally getting some clarity on the mission aspect of it, and Notre Dame getting some clarity on that, I think they're going to try to let him know this week that, hey, it doesn't matter what you do. We love it. So this is going to be, we love you as a player. We want you to be a part of what we're doing here, whenever that might be. That's going to be the message they hammer home to him. Obviously, Notre Dame has their desire on when they'd like him to be there. I believe I think that they usually prefer kids to show up and play your 4 years, and then you can do what you need to do. But they're going to be supportive of whatever he decides to do. That's how much they love him. We've told y'all for months, this is a kid that Notre Dame staff absolutely loves. They absolutely love this kid and want him to be a part of the program. We'll just have to find out when it's going to be. So visit for the next couple of days should be pretty impactful for Davis Andrews in regard to Notre Dame getting clarity on where he stands, and then on him getting some clarity on where Notre Dame stands with him and what they are or are not willing to do with regard to his faith and the things he's willing to do. Now, the good thing for Notre Dame is they've had plenty of Mormon kids on their roster before. Obviously, going back to, since I've been really following recruiting, obviously Ryan Harris is a Muslim, right? And then you've got Manti was a Mormon. I think Kona Schwenke was a Mormon. Obviously, Chris Badger's a kid that went on a Mormon mission and came back and played at Notre Dame. I'm not sure if Maris Luafau is or not. I'd have to check into that one, but they've had plenty of kids like that were Mormon. Kahanu Kia, who came to Notre Dame, played in 2021, and then went on a 2-year mission, is another example. So Notre Dame has some experience with this, including during Marcus Freeman's tenure as the defensive coordinator. So they know how to handle it, and they know how to deliver that message, and I think that's going to be delivered in the next couple of days. So one of the drawbacks of doing a solo show is there's not a lot of periods to take a breath and to drink and clear your throat. So I apologize if a couple times during the show I'm going to have to kind of pause it and take a drink because my throat's a little dry. And I don't know if for you on the board or her not on the board, I got a little sick this weekend, so that did a little damage to my throat as well. But what do I always say? Rule number 76, right? No excuses. Play like a champion. So I'm here ready to play like a champion as best I can. But it will require me sometimes to take a few little drink breaks here and there. Let's get into some other news. Obviously, Xavier Robinson, the running back from Oklahoma, was slated to visit on Tuesday to Thursday. He put a tweet out the other day talking about Iowa State or Notre Dame. And he was a guy that really liked Notre Dame a lot. Well, that visit has been canceled. I'll just let you all do the reading between the lines, all the reading between the lines that you all want to do. That visit was canceled, and he didn't cancel it. So we'll just leave it there and go from there and move on that one. So he will not be making his visit this week. Let's do a quick preview. Well, actually, so anyway, let's wrap this up first before we move on to next weekend. So I kind of I kind of look at this weekend, and there's always some mixed emotions about it from some people. They didn't have enough kids on campus. Why not more kids, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then there's the other side of, why are you bringing kids on when you have a camp going on? And here's what I think Notre Dame did this weekend. I think it was a very smart strategy. I think they brought, I didn't think they brought, I keep saying that. I apologize. They brought a small number of kids on so they could have them here during the camp, so that the official visitors aren't getting neglected because there's so many, but you're also able to have enough time to spend with the campers. And there's some very talented players on campus this weekend. You had two offensive linemen that were at the lineman camp on Saturday, got offered. Maddie Augustine, and I've got to remember the young man. I think it's Will Black. I think is his first name. I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on that. He's both Connecticut kids. I think Notre Dame. Maddie Augustine's an interesting kid. He was actually originally He was actually originally a basketball player, and the football coach. It reminds me a lot of Jason Onye's situation. The football coach saw him in a hallway and basically convinced him to come play football. He then reclassified to 2025, and he camped at Notre Dame this week and really impressed the coaches and walked out with an offer. So I think Notre Dame, that's a guy that a name you need to know from the 2025 class that was on campus this weekend. There was another young man, Derek Meadows, who was on campus this weekend that Notre Dame offered a scholarship to. He's a 6'5", 6'6" kid from Bishop Gorman, ran a really fast time. I mean, he really impressed the coaches with his speed and with his athleticism. They were really high on what this young man did. He reminds me a lot of, so there's a lot of Corey Robinson in his game, but the guy that I think he reminds me even more of, and I use Corey Robinson just for some of the younger folks, but a guy that he reminds me even more of, and this is some of the folks that are kind of my age. You guys remember Ronnie Rodimer? He reminds me a lot of Ronnie Rodimer, but faster. Ronnie Rodimer, for those who don't know, is a kid from West Virginia that I loved coming out of high school. He's like 6'4", 6'5". He's like a long galloper, really talented player. Just had a ton of injuries at Notre Dame, could never be healthy. I think he had some injuries in high school as well, but very talented player. So I see comparisons to him, and I'm going to love that. Now, he's super raw, but he really impressed Notre Dame coaches with his size and athleticism. That's a name to know. There's a lot of kids that impressed the staff this weekend. Daniel Anderson is a kid from Arkansas, really talented running back that got an offer this weekend. I got to do some digging on him. I don't know a lot about him. I don't know that he was a guy that the staff – I don't believe he was a guy the staff anticipated offering this weekend. He just was that good at Irish Invasion. They also offered a safety from Florida, kid from West Orange, Ivan Taylor, which I believe West Orange is where Dexter Williams is from. And then those are all 25 guys. There's a 26 recruit that I really want to keep an eye on that I like a lot, a kid named Blaine Bradford from Baton Rouge Catholic down in Louisiana. He's a 26 kid that they offered this weekend. So another really talented player that Notre Dame offered from this weekend. So it was an impressive showing from those guys, according to my sources, and I think those are guys that impressed this weekend, guys to keep an eye on. But the staff was able to really balance the workouts and the camps and spending time with those players with the official visitors. And I just don't I don't know how if the visit could have gone a whole lot better this weekend, to be honest with you. Now, the key, however, is not losing momentum from a weekend like this with those players. I don't think momentum necessarily carries over from a weekend to the next weekend with recruits. It's all an individual thing. It's all depends on the players that you do. Obviously, you can do well, but it's not like this presence that continues into next weekend. The momentum I'm referring to is more so with these players that visited. Yes, you did a great job with Gearby Lambert, but how you do from here until whenever he goes in decision-making mode is going to be every bit as important. So you did a great job putting yourself in position to, I believe, be his leader. Now it's about closing over the next few weeks. So big opportunity for Joe Rudolph. Big opportunity for Joe Rudolph. And then obviously sealing the deal with the kids that also that you feel you're very close with, guys like Styles Prescott and Kedron Young. So a lot of momentum. I think that's going to be key for the staff coming out of it. And then, of course, if you're able to get some of these guys, it starts answering some questions about who you may or may not be bringing in down the road. So great job Great job by the Notre Dame staff this weekend. Let's talk a little bit about the upcoming weekend for Notre Dame. This is obviously an important weekend for Notre Dame. Just went through. There were some very targeted players. Going to be a little bit of a bigger list this upcoming weekend. Notre Dame doesn't really have any big weekends from a number standpoint like we saw in past years because, guys, I mean, they've got 17 kids committed. There's 8 or 9 spots left. That's it. And I think some of those spots are kind of already accounted for with certain players. So you're really running low on spots. And the staff is doing a good job of targeting guys that they want and think that they can close on and getting those kids on campus. So you're not seeing a ton of kids on campus. But this next weekend is probably going to be the biggest weekend. You're going to have a lot of commits on campus. We expect Cam Williams. This is who we have right now that we know we're pretty confident is going to be on campus. Cam Williams, Logan Thomas, Cole Mullins, Bodie Cahoon, Carson Hobbs, Leonard Moore, and Kennedy Urlacher. We feel pretty good about those guys being on campus. Here are some other players that we expect to be on campus this weekend. Two really big ones that we expect to be on campus this weekend. On offense, Carter Nelson, the tight end from Nebraska. We expect him to be on campus this weekend. And then on defense, Elijah Rushing. This is the weekend that Elijah Rushing is set to come to Notre Dame. So this is going to be a big one. I also think, Sean Silviano is a kid that we had originally had on for this weekend, but I'm not sure if he's coming this weekend or next weekend. I'm not 100% certain of that. So we'll find out more clarity for that. But Elijah Rushing being on campus is really big. You've got Brian Huff as of right now from Arkansas. Linebacker from Arkansas is slated to visit this weekend. Bradley Shaw from Alabama, I believe, is going to visit this weekend. Oliver Miles, safety from Texas, is going to be on campus this weekend. And as far as of right now, Marquise Gallegos is expected to be on campus this weekend. I don't know if that visit is definitely going to happen or not. I'm still trying to get some clarity on that one. So those are guys we expect to be on campus this weekend. And so if Seviano shows up, then you're going to have more commits on campus than non-committed players. If he doesn't show up, then it's basically, you already have that as of right now. With Chris Cole was originally going to visit this weekend. He has pushed that back. He said he's going to take a fall visit. Don't like where Notre Dame is with him right now. Penn State's making a move on him. Georgia's making a move on him. Bama's making a move on him. So Notre Dame is fading a little bit with Chris Cole, which is concerning in a lot of ways. But so he won't be on campus this weekend. But 2 other linebackers will be in Brian Huff and Bradley Shaw. Let's talk first about the 2 big visitors coming this weekend. I mean, they're all important, but the 2 really big ones. That's Carter Nelson and Elijah Rushing. This is going to be your chance. I mean, look, it's a lot of pressure and it's a bold statement, but it's also true. You have 2 kids coming on this weekend that are not necessarily positions of need in that you've already met your tight end numbers need with getting Jack Larson, who's a very good football player, guy the Notre Dame staff is very high on. You've got 3 defensive ends in the class, very good ones, right? Logan Thomas and Cole Mullins are my number 1 and 2 players in this class. On defense for Notre Dame in the commit class, they're both top 150 guys for me. Cole Mullins is close to being a top 100 guy. I watched another game of his against Norcross. It was on TV this year. I had recorded that, completely forgot. Watched that this weekend. Love that kid's game. Love Logan Thomas's upside. Bryce Young has my number 1 upside grade of anyone on the defensive class right now. It's close. It may not end there, but it may not end that way, but that's where he is right now. So you've got your 3 defensive ends. Obviously, Justin Scott is a huge priority for Notre Dame at defensive tackle. So Elijah Rushing isn't a priority from a number standpoint. And the same thing with Elijah Rushing. These 2 kids are priorities because they are big-time football players. They are better than what you have, and they provide you the chance to potential, anyway, to be difference makers. And I actually like this strategy by Notre Dame, especially with Elijah Rushing, because I think you can make a case that a second tight end is needed in 2024. I don't think it's needed. I would rather just, if you can't get a Carter Nelson type, I'd say just bring in Jack Larson and focus on getting 2 tight ends next year because it's a great tight end class next year. That's what I would say to do. But if you get a chance to get a guy like Carter Nelson, who's a game changer, man, you go for it. But I think you could at least you and I could have an argument, not a discussion about maybe there's a need when you talk about some of the injury history of the players currently on the roster and different aspects like that. When you look at 2025 or yeah, so these kids come in 24, so they'll really be competing for playing time in 2025. You may not have Mitchell Evans anymore. You definitely won't have Kevin Bauman anymore. Will you have Holden Stace, Eli Raridan? Where are they going to be? So, hey, make the case for two. Okay. I don't agree with it, but I think it's a good argument to make and a sound argument to make that I wouldn't necessarily tell you, you're just wrong. With defensive end, you don't need a fourth defensive end. You want him because he is Elijah Rushing, because he's a great football player. So let's talk about kind of what's at stake for these two kids this weekend. So with Carter Nelson, look, he's been to Georgia, Nebraska's making a big push. You can't really say, hey, come here, be the only dude, because you also have Jack Larson. So you can't use the whole, well, Georgia has Jaden Riddell kind of argument against him. I think this is a situation where you're going to get your last chance to really impress Carter Nelson. I don't know when his decision is going to be made. He's obviously going to take official visits during this process. He was at Georgia this past weekend. He's taken a lot of unofficial visits during this process. I believe he's been to Alabama. He's been to a lot of different programs. He's got a official visit coming up to Nebraska soon. I think end of the month, I believe, is when he's going to Nebraska. And so this is a young man that you really need to impress. Now, the good news is that Notre Dame comes into this visit in a good place with him. I'm not saying they're his leader. I'm not saying that, oh, just come in and close, it's going to be easy. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying, however, is that he is also going to visit Penn State, I believe. What I am saying, however, is that you're in this one. He likes you a lot. He is high on Notre Dame, as he's also high on Georgia, Penn State, Nebraska, some other programs. And so I think the connection he's made with Jared Parker has been big. I think Jared Parker's done a great job in this recruitment. I think this weekend is going to be your chance to say, hey, we love you. We want you. You've got to do with him what you did with Gilbert Lambert this past weekend, what you did with Styles Prescott, what you did with Kedron Young, which is make your final push, give your final sales call, so to speak, for lack of a better term, and convince this kid this is where it's going to be, and then hold on basically for dear life the next couple of weeks as he takes those visits to Penn State and Nebraska, which I believe I saw on 3 is where he's scheduled to go the next 2 weekends. So there's a lot at stake here. I think Carter Nelson is sort of that final cherry on top of this pass catching class. Got a really good 3-man group of Cam Williams, Isaiah Canyon, and Micah Gilbert at receiver. You've also got Aeneas Williams is a really good pass catching weapon as a running back. This kid that had 1,200 yards receiving as a sophomore in high school. And then, of course, you've got Jack Larson at tight end, who's got, I would argue, the best hands of any tight end I've seen. There's other guys maybe as good as him. I don't know if there's any tight ends that are better, that have better ball skills than what Jack Larson brings to the table. He's also one of the better route runners that you're going to see in this class. I mean, still needs work. He's a junior in high school, but he's a pretty darn good route runner. Carter Nelson brings a completely different skill set to the table than Jack Larson. And I heard somebody last week, somebody had mentioned, aren't they kind of similar in skill set? They're really not. Carter Nelson is more of a Tyler Eifert type, where you're going to play him a lot in the boundary, in the slot, to the field, moving around and letting him use his vertical speed to make plays. He's almost, if you like comparisons, a guy that he reminds me a lot of as far as usage is Devin Funchess from Michigan. Remember at one point in time, he was considered a tight end. They moved him to receiver. I think Carter's very similar to that, a guy that Kyle Pitts at Florida is a way you're going to use him. So he's more of he can block, he's a tough kid and all that, but he's a guy that you're going to be wanting to move around and get in ISOs and put in the boundary and be running down the field. Jack Larson to me is more of a traditional H-back tight end type of player, play some in the slot, play in the wing, can play attached as he fills out, because he's a really strong blocker at this point in time. I think Jack Larson's got a chance to be more of a traditional tight end, even though he doesn't necessarily look like one. 6'3", 230. He's not built like a traditional tight end. He plays like one in some ways, but then also is a good enough route runner and pass catcher that you can move him around and attack a lot with the short to intermediate throws and and concepts where he's going to have to utilize his really good pass catching ability, where Carter Nelson is more of a stretch the field, use his speed kind of guy. So I think they would complement each other very nicely. And that's your pitch. That's your pitch if you're Notre Dame this weekend, is saying, hey, look, you guys play well together. You're not the same guy and you better beat him out or you're not going to play. It's, dude, you are completely different to the guy that is in the class with you, who's kind of an H-back hybrid, short to intermediate guy, phenomenal hands, great route runner, not overly fast, but a really talented kid in this regard. The kid we signed last year is a traditional tight end, 6'5", 250, big kid, line up attached, block, work the play action, work the middle of the field. And then there's you, who's basically a big receiver. You know, we're going to use you to block. We're going to play as a tight end. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. But you are a downfield vertical pass catcher. And I think that's the sales pitch that you give to Carter Nelson is, man, you are a perfect complement to the kids we already have. Whereas when you look at the Georgia pitch, for example, at Georgia, teams that have other tight ends, it's, well, you and Jaden Riddell are kind of similar in what you do, which is why I don't think ultimately Georgia is going to be the pick for him. Of course, Nebraska is going to sell the fact that it's the in-state school and you get a chance to turn this thing around and you're going to be the guy and all this other kind of stuff. And that's an attractive sales pitch as well. Penn State's had good production at the tight end position in recent years. That's going to be a good sales pitch as well. So Notre Dame is going to have to put their best foot forward and say, hey, look, this is where you see we're tight end you. We've had, and here's the other sales pitch. Hey, it wasn't that long ago, 2020, that we have three tight ends from that roster are going to be starters in the NFL next season, potentially. Obviously, Tommy Tremble's been a starter for the Panthers. You had Brock Wright was a starter this past weekend. And, of course, Michael Mayer's going to be. Hey, look, Cole Kmet, you look at some of the past classes they've had. There's years they had four tight ends on the roster that ended up playing the NFL. I think it'd be 2018, I believe. Yes, 2018, Notre Dame had four tight ends on that roster that have gone on to play in the NFL. You had Alize Mack, you had Cole Kmet, you had Tommy Tremble, and you had Brock Wright. So, and in 2018, you also had George Takis, who I think is going to end up being an NFL tight end as well, kid who's now at Boston College now. So the point being, you can sell, hey, look, we put more backups in the NFL tight end the last 7-8 years than Nebraska's put starters. That's a sales pitch. You don't do it that negatively, but you get the point that I'm making. So they're going to get a chance to make that final sales pitch to Carter Nelson this weekend. If it works, then Notre Dame can put themselves into the position of leader and then hold on for dear life the next 2 weekends. That's the goal. Elijah Rushing, this is going to be an interesting one because I don't love where Notre Dame is at right now. I don't think they're in as good a position with Elijah Rushing as they are Carter Nelson. But I think that he likes them a lot. I just don't know if it's a lot enough to meaning he's going to end up picking Notre Dame. There's certainly interest in Notre Dame. He's been on here in his own dime. He's kept a relationship with Notre Dame for all these months, even as other schools sort of passed Notre Dame up a little bit. And so I think this is a chance for him to get on campus and be reminded of something that we have said on the show many times, which is I think Elijah Rushing is a great fit for Notre Dame. He's a very intelligent young man. He's very thoughtful. He's got a lot of personality. He's from a Catholic school. He's academic oriented, and he's incredibly talented. All things Notre Dame that fit incredibly well at Notre Dame. And so to me, I look at it and say, this is a chance for you to kind of show him, hey, I know that you don't think that Notre Dame's the place to be right now, but here's why it is. Because this is your shot, right? I mean, if you can't convince him this weekend that this is the place to be, I don't know what message is going to exist that allows you to do it in 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. I think this is the weekend you've got to make your move. I'm not saying if he doesn't commit, they're out. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is you've got to be able to put yourself and into that category of, hey, we're on the same plane as everybody else. If you can do that coming out of this weekend, then that allows you to then make more impactful conversations and moves with him. That is where you could say, hey, look, don't decide now. Maybe take some unofficials in the fall, unless he's going to decide for you, then you take it. But you get yourself at least in a position where maybe if you think you're not going to get them, you can at least convince them to maybe hold off. That, well, if that school really wants you, they're willing to wait because, hey, man, we'll take you whenever. I think that's going to be an effective pitch for Notre Dame. And so, but you've got to come out of this weekend feeling like you absolutely crushed the visit. If you don't come out of this weekend with Notre Dame like on the same level or leading for him, I don't know that it's going to happen. And that's the pressure that's on the board for Notre Dame this weekend when it comes to Elijah Rushing and also Carter Nelson. Also, linebacker recruiting is going to be very interesting this weekend. Oh, and by the way, I do think it's important to have Logan Thomas and Cole Mullins on campus this weekend. If they're able to make it up for their officials, I think that's going to be huge for Notre Dame with Elijah Rushing. There's going to be two linebackers on campus this weekend, and they're both in very different situations. Brian Huff is a young man from Arkansas. He's a really raw but talented player. I like his upside a lot. If I'm ranking the linebackers that I like that I would take that I think are on the board, it's Kingston number 1, it's Chris Cole number 2, and it's Brian Huff number 3. I actually like Brian Huff quite a bit. I think he's a kid that's could maybe potentially fill out and be a Mike, but I think he's more of a will type guy that, if anything, he could be someone who kind of outgrows the position a little bit and moves down into Viper. But I think linebackers where I really like him right now. Athletic kid, just raw, just very raw. But I love the tools. He likes Notre Dame a lot. He was going to try to visit, I believe, the Blue Gold game is when he was slated to come up and visit. There were some travel things that can't happen, like ticket prices went way up, and it just was really hard for him to make it up. He was very bummed about it because I do think there's a lot of interest in Notre Dame. I don't think they're in a position where he's a guy you're going to be able to land. But if you're going to be able to maybe get him down the road, this is the weekend to do it because you're going to have Kingston coming on campus the following weekend. That's your number 1 guy. Let's say you don't get him. Let's say he goes to Ohio State. Now you're in a position where they want a third linebacker in this class. And I think need a third linebacker, although I'd be open to the discussion of only taking 2, especially if Kahanu Kia is going to be coming back, which I'm still not 100% certain of. I believe that's the plan, but I can't say with 100% certainty that he is. I'd be willing to, just take 2 if you don't get him. If you can't, only take 2 if you can't get another high ceiling or high floor guy. And I think that obviously Chris Cole and Brian Huff are both high ceiling guys to me. So I would take him if you could get him. I just don't know if they're in a position right now where they're going to be able to get him. But this is your chance though, right? This weekend is your chance to make that impression with Brian Huff. So I'm very curious to see how things go with him. I'm very curious to see if they can convince him to say, hey, look, this is why this is the place to be. You're also going to have Bradley Shaw from Alabama on campus this weekend. He's a very interesting player. Bradley Shaw has great film. I mean, great film. His high school film, I believe he's at Hoover, is really impressive. Here's the only question. He's not very big. He's 6'1", 210, plays like a middle linebacker. He kind of fits into the category that we've talked about for a while with Notre Dame is they get these kids that are pretty quality athletes and they're really smart and distinctive football players. They lack the size profile that you want. And that's the issue that I have with Bradley Shaw is, I mean, if you were able to get him in the class, you'd be getting a really good football player, but you question what's the projection going to look like at the next level because of the lack of size. And I think that's really the only concern with him. But the staff likes him. He's been on campus before. He was visited, I believe, in April or March, but I think it was April is when he was on campus. Things went really well. They've been down to his high school, to kind of to check out what he's got going on down there and all that kind of stuff. But I just think the concern I have is the projection. That's my concern. I think he's a little bigger than some of the guys we were talking about here. He's a little bit longer than like J.D. Bertrand. He's a little bit longer than Drew White, but it's the same concern that you have. He's built like a Mike, or he plays like a Mike, but he's built like a Rover. And I think that's a little bit of my concern with Bradley Shaw based on what I've seen from him. But he's also a guy that is a smart football player and a talented football player and an athletic football player. And that's why the staff is looking at him. Last player we're going to talk about from this weekend, you've got Oliver Miles coming up from Texas. He's a very intriguing player. I'll be honest with you all. I don't know how I feel about Oliver Miles, and I'm back and forth on this one. Here's what I'd like. He's very long. He's listed anywhere from 5'11" to 6'1". I mean, 5'11", 6 foot looks about right. But he's got really long arms, and he's a guy that is going to play with greater length than maybe what his height is. He's extremely athletic. His jumping numbers are outstanding, so there's a lot of explosiveness to his game. He's got a lot of good long speed, so really rangy. Can play the alleys, can play center field, plays a lot of quarterback. He shows me some good athleticism and explosiveness. I don't know that he's got great short area speed, but he's got good short area quickness. I think there's things you can maybe do technically to improve him there. The issue is he's just not a natural football player right now. And so when I look at him, I was talking with Ryan earlier today, and we were talking about Oliver, and I said, the concern I have is he's a lot like Ramon Henderson, in that right now he's an outstanding athlete, and especially on track. In track, I should say, he's more of a leaper than a sprinter, but he's got great testing numbers, great track numbers, but he's just not a natural football player. And with Ramon Henderson, I mean, how many years have we been talking about, like, if this is the year the light goes on? And so far, the light hasn't gone on to the degree where his production matches his athleticism and size. And so that's always a concern with a kid like Oliver Miles. I think the reason the staff likes him is because, look, they've been having a hard time getting really high-level safeties. A guy like Oliver Miles is one of those. He may come here and never really have an impact. He could come here and just be a solid toolsy guy that is never a difference maker, which is what Ramon Henderson has been up to this point in time. Or if the light does go on for him, he has an incredibly high ceiling. And I think that's what when you look at the fact that they've had some issues really getting those high-level safeties, then you say, hey, maybe we take a flyer on a kid like this who has a very high ceiling, just needs a lot of work, and then trust the coaching. Because I think there's a lot of faith in Chris O'Leary as a position coach that this is a guy you can thrive with. And I think Chris O'Leary is a very good football coach, but I'm not ready to go this far that, oh, yeah, get him then, because he's got that kind of guy already. And he's made him a good player, but he hasn't made him a player that's reached his full potential. And I'm obviously talking about Ramon Henderson. So, but I think I know the staff loves his athleticism and potential. I just have some questions about, is he more of an athlete right now, or is he a football player? And that's why his senior season for me is going to be super important. In a perfect world, this would be the guy that you wish you could recruit like you did 20 years ago, when you didn't really get a lot of kids committing in the summer. The only kids that committed in the summer were like linemen and local kids and like the really good kids if you can get them. But most kids you recruited during the season, because this is the kind of kid you want to see senior film on. Because I'm telling you the concerns I have right now about him, and I'm being honest about him. But I'm also telling you what I like. Well, we may go out in the first 4 or 5 games of senior year and be like, oh, light went on. He's a dude, right? He's a really good athlete. We already knew that, but now he's a football player. And you fall in love with him. Remember, I didn't love Ben Minich when they got a commitment from him last summer. Okay, went out of senior year, loved it, loved the senior film. So that stuff happens. But now you're kind of taking a flyer on a kid that you love his potential, but he's got a lot to learn as a football player. But I think the potential is what this Notre Dame staff is banking on and what they like about him. There's another safety. There's 2 safeties slated to visit the next weekend, Jalen McClain from New Jersey and Malcolm Ziegler. I've said all along, I'll believe Jalen McClain is coming when he shows up. I hope he comes, and I hope, because I think he's a kid that's a great Notre Dame fit. He just doesn't know that he's a great Notre Dame fit. But I don't have a lot of faith in that one. So I think that Oliver Miles this weekend and Malcolm Ziegler that next weekend are going to be really 2 important recruitments to watch. But Miles is a kid I know the Notre Dame staff is very high on. We'll just have to see if some of those questions maybe get answered this weekend, and if they can impress him enough to say, look, this is the place to be, because they want to recruit the state of Texas, and I think that factors into why they like him as well. Is they want to continue to say, hey, look, if we're going to take a flyer on a kid, we're going to take a flyer on a kid from a state like Texas or Georgia or a place like that where he's going against top competition, that he's getting good coaching and those type of things, and I think that's where Notre Dame is right now with Oliver Miles. I'll be honest, if you were asked my opinion, I would want to just see how his senior season goes for me before I'd take him. If you can get a Malcolm Ziegler, for example. I love Malcolm Ziegler. He's actually tests faster than Paul Menke. He's a more natural football player. He plays a lot of corner in high school that I think is a kid that could be a really good safety or nickel at the next level. That's who I like the most. I just don't know where Malcolm is with Notre Dame. I haven't had a chance to talk to him yet. I don't believe Ryan's really had a chance to talk to him yet. So they may not feel they're in a good place with him. But as far as just looking at the game, he'd be my priority, with Miles kind of next on my priority list. But the thing about them both is they're both really athletic. And as we've said before, when this staff takes chances on kids, 9 times out of 10, it's a kid that's long and athletic. And that's the kind of chance that you want to take on a player. And so I think those are aspects I really, really like about Oliver Miles. So that's next weekend's visitors. We're going to go to the mailbag next, but I wanted to kind of preview this upcoming weekend's visits. Wanted to recap, obviously, what happened. I think, again, Notre Dame did a tremendous job this weekend. Don't know if it could have gone a whole lot better. And I think we'll see very soon some of the rewards from this weekend become evident. So make sure you stay tuned for those. We're going to go to the mailbag next, folks. But before we do, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. We've had a lot of signups to the message board lately. We had an intel piece this past weekend on the message board. I'm starting to work on some O-line type run game cut-ups that I'm going to do for film rooms here in the month of June. So I'm going to have some message board only film cut-ups, some football 101 only for the message board stuff that we're going to do here over the next couple months as we get into the summer. So definitely make sure you check those out. And that's why you're going to be signed up for the message board. Sign up for a monthly membership at $4.99. If you sign up for, you get 10% off your next purchase of the Irish Breakdown merch store, which you can see the link below in the description box below. If you sign up for an annual membership, it's only $49.99. Great rate. It's not an introductory rate or a sale rate. It's just the rate. So you won't be charged extra next year when you renew. You get a 20% off discount to the merch store if you sign up for an annual membership. But you can also join our booster club. If you're a current member and you want to upgrade, or you're not a member and you want to support us, people always say, hey, how can we support you? How can we support you? The booster club, obviously the message board, is a great way to support us. We don't have to split that revenue with anybody. It just goes to Irish Breakdown. The growth in the message board is a big reason why I was able to hire Ryan. It's why I'm trying to make another hire right now. It's that growth is where a lot of that comes from. So if you want to support us, even if you're not a message board person, but you want to support us financially, that's a great way to do it. You can sign up for one of the normal memberships, or you can join the booster club. We have the Shamrock, the blue, and the gold. They're all different levels. If you sign up for the Shamrock or the blue, you get a free IB Club mug, which only goes to IB Club members. And so those people that sign up for the booster club. If you sign up for the Gold Club, which is our highest booster package, you not only get the IB Club mug, you also get an IB Gold Club shirt that only goes to Gold Club members. I own the company. I don't have an IB Gold Club shirt. It's that exclusive, and I want it to be that important for people that only those people get that. And so it's just a little thank you from us to say, hey, thank you for support. And we've had a lot of signups for that. So you can sign up for that as well if you're someone who has asked yourself, hey, I really want to support them financially. Those are ways that you can help support us financially. Let's go into the mailbag. We don't have a ton of questions so far, but I'm going to try. I'm sure you guys are going to get some more in. We've got about 11 right now, and we're going to dive into those right now. We got a few super chats. I want to start off with those. Thank you for your super chat here, Nathan Milton. He says, Tommy Rees, top 10 OC. Figured you needed a laugh, Brian. Thanks for all the content, even though you're a man down and under the weather. So I appreciate that. I'm not like sick. I think I had some bad food on Saturday, and that kind of jacked me up. So I didn't have a lot of energy yesterday. I was going to mow the lawn, just didn't have the energy for it. After I made dinner, I was like, man, I need to sit down. But it really jacked my voice up. You know, sometimes that'll do that to you. Wasn't as bad as last time, but it was not a pleasant weekend. But I'm feeling a lot better now. Thank you, Nathan. The Tommy Rees top 10 OC thing. I mean, are we in any of a surprise? I mean, look, there's no way in heck if Tommy Rees stays at Notre Dame, he's considered a top 10 OC. That's just the reality of it. Could he end up being one? Sure. I mean, you guys know, and I've said for a while, I think Tommy's a really smart guy, and I'm very curious to see what the influence that Nick Saban will have on him. We'll see. But this notion that he's a top 10 OC right now, it's just typical SEC bias. There's no way that people are saying he's a top 10 OC if he's still in Notre Dame. Even if you want to make the case he is, it's not about if he is or isn't. It's about what about his reputation has warranted that. Now, there's a lot of reasons why he hasn't put a great offense on the field. Some of it is on him. Some of it's bad luck, not having talent, whatever the case may be. But and I don't buy that. I'm saying in certain positions, mainly quarterback, that's been the case. But I mean, I expected that. And just like ESPN ranked Tyler Buckner and whoever starts at quarterback in Alabama had a Sam Hartman, just because it's Alabama. I mean, they literally said it. It's just Alabama, which is just utter nonsense. But I expected that. I didn't get a good laugh out of it. I mean, the way you think, because I like Tom Reese. I think he's a smart football coach. I just think he still has a lot to learn as a coach. And you hope, if you're a Tommy Reese supporter, you hope that being under Nick Saban is something that brings that out and helps him kind of work through some of his warts as a young coach. We all had them when we were young coaches, when we were 28, 29, 30, 31. We're all learning. If you're as good of a coach as you're ever going to be at 30, then you need to find something else better to do, because you're just not that good of a coach. He's going to get better. I just don't know how much better he's going to get in year one at Alabama with shaky quarterback situation. But we're going to find out. We're going to find out. Super chat from Call Me Ty. Thank you, Call Me Ty, very, very much. It says 23 seemed to have more peaks and valleys in recruiting than 24. 23 had the top-ranked class for a long time, then the decommitments. Do you think this was a change in strategy this year? No, this is a good question, Ty. We've been asked this before on the message board. Give me a sec. I don't think it was a change in strategy because big picture, because they're still trying to recruit the big time guys. They're still look. They didn't stop recruiting big time players. They have a 5-star quarterback in the class. They have a 5-star receiver in the class. They're trying to recruit a 5-star defensive tackle. They're trying to recruit a 5-star defensive end. They're still trying to recruit one of the best offensive tackles in high school football right now, in Gary Lambert. They're trying to recruit a top 100 running back, in my opinion, and then the opinion of On 3 and Kedron Young. They're trying to recruit a top 50 caliber player, top 100 caliber player at tight end in Carter Nelson. And they're trying to flip a really talented cornerback from Tennessee that's committed to Tennessee. They're trying to sign a top 100 linebacker in Kingston Viliama Asa. So they're recruiting the high-level guys. It's just, number one, I think the fact that their 5 stars have been committed for so long. Like, I hear people say this. Well, they had more high-level players last year. Really? Okay, they had Keon Keeley. Okay, I got that one. At this point in time a year ago, they had Peyton Bowen. Okay, agree with that. They had Drake Bowen a year ago. Okay, agree with that. But who are the other top 50, 7,500 guys that they had? Braylon James. Okay, I agree with that. Hey, Jeremiah Love was not committed till October last year. Christian Gray wasn't in the class this time a year ago. Jaden Osbury wasn't in the class this time a year ago. Those kids didn't commit till July and August. Charles Jackasaw was not in the class this time a year ago. Boubacar Traore, I think, committed after this as well. Armel Mukam committed later than this. So they had 12 kids, I think, committed at this time a year ago. I think it's the timing of it. I think that people just kind of forget that Notre Dame has some 5-star kids. I think another part of it is the fact that some of the kids that I think are really talented guys aren't ranked high. So as much as some of you say, I don't care about rankings, you do, because it impacts your lack of excitement for certain players. If this was just a conversation about talent and no one had any rankings to look at, I think the excitement about the defensive end class would be way higher than it is. It just would be. So I don't think it's a change in strategy. I just think last year they got some kids early. This year, the top players on defense aren't committing early, but they're way ahead of where they were on offense at this point in time a year ago. So I think the only thing that's changed, Ty, in strategy this year is, as far as they're doubling down on certain things. We want to recruit Texas. We want to recruit Georgia. We want to do those type of things. We want to recruit top level players. We want to recruit long athletic guys. The only thing that's changed is, number one, as I said, some of the top players are not committing, which isn't a change. For Notre Dame, it's a change in circumstance. So they got to close on those guys later as opposed to getting them early and hanging on. The other change is they're not letting kids silently commit and taking those commitments until if they're going to visit. And I think that they've been very adamant about that. If you want to take visits, that's cool. Just don't commit. They've done that. They did that with Peyton Pierce. They did that with Justin Scott. So they're very adamant about that, because I don't think they want to get in a situation where they get a commitment and then lose it. I think that's the only really change that we've seen. I I think this there's less guys I'm concerned about flipping out of this class than last year's class. I just think this is an underrated class. It's not an elite class. That's going to be defined by the finish. And there's no question about that. This is not a true gap closing top 5 class. It is right now, but it's not going to stay there if they don't finish strong. I mean, other schools are going to pass them up. Bama has how many commitments does Bama have right now? It's not many. Let me just look this up real quick. Bama doesn't have a lot of commits right now. I'm looking up the rivals rankings. Give me or class real quick. They have 8 kids committed. They're ranked 15th in the country. They just took a 3-star offensive lineman. We all know Bama's going to sign 15, 20 more kids, and they're going to be ranked, and they're going to skyrocket up the rankings, right? We know this. You've got other teams that right now aren't ranked super high because they don't have a lot of kids committed, and they will. They'll have a lot more. Florida right now ranks 11th. They only have 8 kids committed. They're going to sign more. Clemson ranks 17th. They only have 8 kids committed right now. They're going to sign more. They're going to go up the rankings. Oklahoma right now ranks 26 in recruiting. They only have 6 kids committed. They're going to get a lot more. They're going to go up the rankings. Notre Dame right now has 17 kids committed. Ohio State only has 13. Tennessee only has 12. Florida State only has 11. As those teams get more players, then they're going to catch and pass Notre Dame from a perception and a recruiting ranking standpoint if Notre Dame doesn't close on the top kids on the board. So it means getting Kedron Young, getting Carter Nelson, getting Gearby Lambert, getting Elijah Rushing or Justin Scott. You got to get at least one of those two. Getting Kingston at cornerback, flipping Caleb Beasley, getting Bronte Johnson at safety. Those things are all important to Notre Dame finishing with where they are now, which is a top 5 class. I mean, right now, Notre Dame, by everyone that to me does recruiting rankings like a sane group, and with any sense whatsoever. And so I'm leaving On3 out of this conversation because the way that they do their team rankings, first of all, I barely understand, and what I do understand makes 0 sense. But right now, Notre Dame has the number 3 ranked recruiting class in the country. Number 3. So yeah, they were ranked number 1 a lot last year. They're not that far off right now. They're number 3. But if they're going to stay in this area, they've got to close on the big-time players. They're going to fall back eventually just because there's a bias in the recruiting rankings with some of those places. What's funny is I think On3's recruiting rankings, I just hammered them. I think On3 is the outlet that, to me, has the least bias towards Notre Dame. I actually think Rivals is moving in a direction where a lot of the people that I know for a fact had bias against Notre Dame are not involved in the rankings process anymore. So I think we're going to see a little bit more fairness there. They just hired my guy, John Garcia Jr., who you all know I have a great deal of respect for. He's going to be fair in rankings, and he's not going to be pro Notre Dame or anti. He's just going to be fair. He's going to give you an honest opinion. And so I think Rivals is moving closer to that, but they've got some kids that they're missing on right now. I've told them that. Isaiah Canyon is not a 3-star. They have Styles Prescott is like a middle of the road 5.5 3-star, like 5.6 3-star. I think he's better than that. He's not a top 100 guy by any stretch, but he's better than that. So there's some guys they're down on, but they have Peter Jones in the top 100. Everybody else has dropped him down. They have Leonard Moore higher than everybody else, but there's just not going to be enough of the push that they should be getting that happens at other places. So they're going to fall out, but it's going to, for all intents and purposes, if you close with the guys that I just talked about, it's a top 5 class, meaning there are not 5 classes in college football that I would trade for Notre Dame's class. And I felt the same way about last year's class. I don't care what the rankings say. So I like where Notre Dame's class is at right now. I think it's just about the finish. And last year was about the finish. The same thing last year. You got to get Christian Gray. You got to get Jay Osbury. You got to hold on to Keon. You got to hold on to Peyton Bowen. You've got to get Jaden Greathouse. You've got to get this kid. You got to get that kid. You got to get Jagasol. And they got a lot of those guys, but then they couldn't hold on to some other guys. So that's going to be the key, is just being able to do that. I don't think, other than what I discussed, there was a huge change in strategy from this season compared to last season. Wicked Bronco Productions, thank you for Super Chat. Update on Justin Scott after the Georgia visit. I think if Scott makes it out of June uncommitted, he ends up at Notre Dame. I know Scott said Georgia tied with Miami and Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame needs Scott or Rushing. Hope we get both. I don't have a lot of update. I don't know what really expect me to say. He just finished up a visit to Georgia. I know what you're referring to. You're referring to a tweet that was made where Justin said that Georgia has tied Miami Notre Dame. I said this on the message board. If that's true, that's great for Notre Dame because number one, he said Miami and Notre Dame, not Michigan. So I think that Notre Dame felt that Michigan was making a push, that the most was making a push. Chad Bowden, Marcus Freeman are also now more involved with that one, I believe. And so Notre Dame is pushing for him again. And I think the fact that Notre Dame was the northern school that he mentioned is a great sign because, as I've said before, if he commits now, I still think he signs with a northern school when it's all said and done. It's just which northern school. So the fact that he said that is an encouragement. And to me, kind of to your point, I think they got a shot to get him in the end, even if he does commit somewhere else. I've said that they've got to recruit him well and recruit him properly. But if they do what they're supposed to do, I think ultimately they still get him. If Georgia can kind of keep him from committing to Miami in June or July, that's good for Notre Dame because that ensures he's going to take visits in the fall. And one of them will be an official to Notre Dame because he's talked about taking an official to Notre Dame. If he's going to get back down to Georgia, if he's going to get back down to Miami, those are going to be unofficial visits, which means he's got to pay to go to those schools a second time because he's already gone to them unofficially once already. Now he's taking the official. So Georgia could end up helping Notre Dame here if Notre Dame can continue to make him the top priority the way that he needs to be. I don't care about D tackle, DN. You're a top priority in this class. Treat him as such from now until signing day. If they do that, I think they'll be okay. And I think Georgia can help with that because I think Georgia might slow down his decision-making process a little bit. And that's where I think it could help. But, as far as updates for Notre Dame, there aren't any. I think that they were able to they didn't make any movement this weekend, but if Georgia was able to do what I said, that's going to, I think, be very helpful for Notre Dame. Got a super chat from Raymond Hart. He says, thanks for the intel over the weekend, Brian. Keep up the good work. I will do my best. It's obviously been tough because Ryan's out on paternity leave. His little one is doing very well. Rain is doing very well. I was talking to him earlier today. So he's doing fine. He's slated to come back as of right now next week. So hopefully we'll get him back on the show on Monday. And we'll have him back on there. So, but I appreciate that. And if for just those that don't know, we put an intel piece on the board yesterday. We also did a late night sort of football chat as well. Which is like 9-10 pages long. So if you're not a board member, you missed that as well. I just was sitting there getting some work done. Was going to be in front of the computer. I was sitting down and said, hey, let's do a chat. So a ton of questions that were asked. I answered them as best I could. And I think there's some good stuff in there. We got some really good nuggets. I put a couple updates this morning on that Intel thread. So if you checked it out yesterday but haven't today, definitely check that out because there's some new updates on where things stand in that Intel piece. Another super chat from Wicked Bronco Productions. Thank you very much for your super chat as well. Your second super chat as well. I personally use 24/7 and On3. I like On3 because they rank based on the average ranking of each player and class in the big four recruiting sites. So you get a law of averages. If you're talking about their consensus rankings, yes, that's fine. That's not how they do their team rankings. I don't really care much for 247, to be honest with you, in so many different ways. I think On3's rankings are just not good, but I like their consensus ranking because, as you said, they weigh all four of them equally, as opposed to weighing their own rankings more, which is what 247 does. I mean, it's fine. I think what I like about On3, I'll give you two things I like about On3. Number one is, as I said, I think the way they rank is kind of silly. And I don't think the classes, I don't agree with a lot of their assessments about certain players, but there's two things about it. Number one is they do it with conviction, which I respect. And I don't see any bias. I don't. There was a kid that was committed to Michigan State last year that I thought, what the heck is that guy doing in the top 100? What's the bias of having that kid? I think the kid was from Oklahoma or something like that, Utah or something like that. Let me look up Michigan State's class real quick last year. We'll find it was the quarterback that was committed to Michigan State. I remember watching this kid play, and I'm like, this, I don't know what the heck they're talking about. I didn't agree with the ranking at all. But what's the bias there? Yeah, this kid from Oregon, Sean Levitt. They had in the top 100. I was like, what's the bias there? The bias is that their evaluation, that it wasn't we're a pro Michigan State site or we pump up the SEC or whatever. I don't agree with your ranking. There were some Notre Dame kids right now that are last year that they had ranked higher than everybody else. So I don't think their rankings are biased. I just don't think they're that good. I don't think the process is that good. But there are some kids in this class, especially. I think they're way closer on than anybody else. They have Isaiah Canyon as a top 100 player. Others have him as like a 3-star. They have Kedron Young as a top 100. And only one other outlet has him in their top 250, and I think 247, I believe, has Kedron Young still as a 4-star. I mean, excuse me, as a 3-star. I believe I'm pulling up that right now. Yeah, no, they have him as a 4-star now, but not in their top 247. ESPN doesn't have him in their top 300, but On3 has him at number 82. So I believe that they have done a really nice job um, of putting good ranking, like a good faith effort into their rankings. I just don't agree with a lot of their rankings, but I don't think it's a Notre Dame bias in my opinion. And I do like their consensus is good uh, as far as taking it. And the other thing I like about On3 is just their site, the way that their player profiles work is really the cleanest. You can see what other schools are recruiting a kid. You can look at their visits. You can look at where all the other sites rank them. I think they're the only one that actually show what the other sites rank a kid. I like that. I'm a fan of that. So in that regard, I like it. I like the functionality of their player profiles. That's the only thing I go over there for. I think the way they do rankings is silly as far as team rankings. I don't agree with a lot of their player rankings, but there's some that I think they're spot on and they're way better than everybody else. It's just going to be the case. That's just going to be the case. So if they can improve their evaluations, I mean, they're going to pass everybody up quick because of some of the other good stuff. Now, I think that NIL thing that they do is absurd. I hate it. But take that aside, I like a lot of the other things they're doing outside of like from a make sure I'm clear here. I have a lot of issues with some of the individual sites, and I'm talking about like the functionality of their website, the way that works. That's what I really like at this point in time. That's better than everybody else, and the way they do their consensus compared to the composite ranking, I think is also better than what a lot of other people are doing. All right, Bailey Brad with a question here. He says Kirby Smart is 47 years old and currently on a roll. So over under 7 national titles by the time he's done coaching. Under. Look, what Nick Saban did is rare. And yeah, he won 2 titles. Kirby's gonna. I'll be shocked if he doesn't win another one. I'm not saying he got lucky, and I'm not saying that. I just to me, there's no way he gets to 7 in my opinion. And that's not a knock on Kirby. That's not saying he's not a good coach. I'm not saying, but what Saban did was rare. I mean, I don't know we've ever seen it before. And so to sit there and say, oh, the next guy that's really good is going to do the same thing. I mean, look, Tom Coughlin coached for how many years? He had back-to-back titles, and he never won another one. Of course, he retired soon after that. But we've seen this before, right? Where a guy has a really success and early on, or has a stretch where they're really good, and just can't continue it because it's hard to do that. It's hard to win championships. Period. It's hard to win back-to-back championships, and then to be able to do it to where you're now the guy everybody wants to go after, and you just start losing your coaches, and it's just hard to maintain that level of success for a long period of time. It really is. So 7, no, I don't think he gets a 7. I don't think anybody gets a 7. Yeah, I mean, I just don't. Yeah, I don't. Wicked Bronco. I'll say this too. I think going to 12 is going to make it harder too, because now they got to win more games, and that's always harder in my opinion. And when you expand the playoff format, there's always a chance that some team's going to get in that's kryptonite for you. And that's always a reality. I mean, remember when Hugh Freeze was giving Alabama problems? Jimbo Fisher, as bad of a job he's done, he's given Saban back-to-back really tough games. They beat him in 21, and honestly, almost beat him again this year. Had the ball, I think, inside the 20 with a chance to beat Alabama. It's just like that sometimes. There's just some teams that are kryptonite for other teams, or the matchups are much better. Ohio State can go toe-to-toe with Georgia, the national champ, the defending champ, the team that won it this year. Go toe-to-toe with them. Move the ball down the field. You're a play here, a play there away. But yet Michigan works them back-to-back years. It's a bad matchup for them. And that's one thing I love about football. And the more you have to teams like that are brought into the process, the greater chance that you run into that team. And I think that's something that's going to make it a little bit harder for a team like Alabama to do what they did, in my view. Have another super chat from Wicked Bronco Productions. Thank you again for that. On3 usually ranks Notre Dame guys fairly, except CJ Carr. They dropped CJ to 150, but kept him at number 5 QB. Chad Powers' explanation made tons of Indy fans mad. I have no clue what his explanation was. I don't care what his explanation was. It's a terrible ranking. But my point is, I don't think he's being unfair to CJ. I don't think there's any Notre Dame bias involved in his ranking. I just think it's a terrible ranking. But he's been wrong. I mean, he did that with Dante last year, even though Dante was moved on from Notre Dame and he dropped Dante down. He had Brandon Ennis in the 90s. I mean, I think Brandon Ennis is a top 15 player. He just has bad rankings, in my opinion, with a lot of kids. And I just don't think that there's a bias involved. I've never seen anything from Charles Powers. It's Charles Powers, by the way. But I've never seen anything from Charles Powers that says, boy, that guy's got a bias for this school or this conference, and he's got an anti this conference bias. He has biases like we all do. I just think the evaluation process is where I think he goes wrong. I don't think there's anything inherently biased about what he does. That's just kind of my 2 cents on him. But yeah, the CJ Carr ranking is an example of it's just a bad ranking. But I mean, he's got Peyton Pierce. Actually, let me go look and see if that's the case. Like, I don't think Peyton Pierce is as good as some people make him out to be. I think he's a good player. Don't get me wrong. But he's ranked as the number 77 player in the country by Rivals. That's way too high. I think 247 has at 190. I think that's closer. He's like a top 250-ish kind of guy for me. But On3 has him ranked as the number 116 player in the state of Texas and the number 79 linebacker. That's a crazy ranking. But it's a kid going to Ohio State. He didn't do that because he was looking at Notre Dame, and then now that he's going to Ohio State, he changes it. I don't think Charles Powers knew that the kid was silently committed to Notre Dame. I just think it's a bad ranking, in my opinion. I think that's really what it comes down to. I can respect that, though. I can respect the guy that's putting in the work that will stand up and give an explanation and say, look, I just think he's wrong. But I still respect the process more than I do at some other places. I'll leave it at that. All right. Yeah, one here from Terry Gillery says, would you have taken Ian Moore? I do think it's the last name on that one, Bad Omen. I would not have taken Ian Moore. If I had to choose between him and Anthony Knapp, I'd probably take Ian Moore. What I would have done is I would have taken, after Peter Jones, I'd have taken Caleb Brewer. I still think Notre Dame gets Caleb Brewer if they would have pushed for him. I do. And I think that was a mistake by Coach Rudolph. I do. I don't like that decision. I don't agree with it, but he did it with conviction, and we'll see if he's right. And so it was that's one that I would criticize him more than the ranking or than the picking of Ian Moore. I think Ian Moore's a nice player. I don't think he's a top 100 guy that people make him out to be. I don't see that. So I'm okay with them not getting him. I wouldn't have passed on him for who they passed on him for, if that makes sense. All right, David Cook with a question. David asks, do the coaches give committed kids a strength conditioning and dietary regimen that they would like them to follow before getting to Notre Dame? They don't give committed kids that. They give, when they sign, however, they can give them that. That's the difference. So you can't give, I don't believe you can give committed kids that kind of thing, because even though they're committed to you, you still have to treat them like everybody else. Once they sign on the dotted line, they sign their letter of intent, signing day comes and goes, then you can give them that stuff. So like Notre Dame commits of the Notre Dame incoming freshmen that haven't arrived yet, the kids that arrive in June, they've all been given workout plans and nutrition plans and all that kind of stuff. So they've been working on that stuff for a while, but they didn't get it till like January after they'd signed and the new plans came out. It's a good question. Rob Osgood said, great article on the IB boards about Gilbert Lambert and Joe Rudolph. Thank you for that. It's an intel update, not necessarily an article, just so if people sign up and they're looking for it, it's in the intel piece. Does this weekend somewhat change your view of Rudolph as a recruiter? New coach, get in late, but looks like he did well this weekend. No, it doesn't change it, Rob. I mean, we talked about this last week. it's I explain kind of why I'm going to be critical of the job he's done when it warrants it, but why I've said I want to wait and see because I want to see how he does with certain things, and all because I know that offensive line recruiting is different. It's not the same as it is at other positions, and so we wanted to see you know, how does it play out? Can he make the impression? But at the same time, having a good weekend doesn't change my view. Do you get the kid in the class or not? Impressing him over the course of a weekend doesn't mean a thing. What matters is, can you get the kid in the class? That's going to be what the evaluation is. Now, if he's able to get Gearby Lambert and Styles Prescott in the class and sign them, then any concerns that I have about the process and some of the things he's done, those are going to be put aside to a large degree. And then it comes down to, like I am with every other coach, well, I don't particularly agree with you this evaluation, but the guys do. There's not every kid that Coach Eastan took. I love that. I didn't love Chris Tarrick the way that Coach Eastan did. I didn't like John Montelis a lot coming out of high school, but you can still have that disagreement. Say, but the guy's doing a great job. We just happen to have a disagreement on this particular player, and he's who he is. So you kind of give him the benefit of the doubt. And I think Coach Rudolph has a chance to do that, but he's going to have to get these kids into class. It's not just about doing well in a weekend. We've seen a lot of guys come and go. Hey, this guy, great weekend, and it was awesome, and everything went well, but he went on 2 other visits, and by the time those visits were over, you were done. It's about who do you land, and that's going to be the key. That's going to be the key, Rob. But again, I think the impression I'm getting from your question, and I could be reading it wrong, is that we said he was a terrible recruiter and a bad recruiter. We've never said that. I mean, we've said he was a very good recruiter at Wisconsin. He was known as a very good recruiter at Wisconsin. I didn't agree with the decision to take Anthony Knapp over Caleb Brewer. They faded with Charles Jackasol. Gearby Lambert, that's a fact. Now he's done a good job getting back in there, but let's see if you can sign him. But we talked about this last week. He was going to get a chance to come out and prove that he can get it done, and he put a good foot forward. But until Gearby's in the class, it doesn't mean a whole lot. If he gets in the class, then we can have this conversation, and I'll be very positive about him at that point in time. But he did a great job this weekend. I'm not taking that away, but it's about closing, not about, hey, the kid really liked us. We finished second. He loved us. It was hard for him to say no and go somewhere else. Still went somewhere else. It doesn't matter. You lose by 30 or you lose by 3, it's still a loss. And that's where we need to kind of figure things out right now. This is an interesting question from JHT 1988. Brian was also curious about this. How does ego come into play for coaches recruiting kids who aren't 100% into your school? Is there ever an attitude of why go for a kid who we aren't number 1 for? Not good coaches. Look, every kid that's at Alabama did not just wake up at, one day at 5-year-old and say, I want to go play for Alabama. Not every kid that went to Alabama originally had Alabama number 1. Keon Keeley being a great example. I still don't think Keon likes Alabama as much as Notre Dame, but they sold him on a vision for what they can do for him. That worked for him. Me and Ryan talked about this at the All-Star game. He spent as much time hanging out with Notre Dame kids, if not more, than the Alabama kids. But Alabama got the job done. And so are there coaches like that? Sure. Are good coaches like that? No. Because if you are, then you're just going to constantly bring in just okay players because you're just not going to always be the school for kids. And I think you need to put that kind of thing aside and say, hey, look, it's our job to make sure that we're number 1 when it's all said and done. I don't care where we are when we start the process. Now, if a kid is just constantly not willing to engage you in the process, then sure, you don't waste time. I'm not going to beg you to even talk to me. There's a line that you get to where you're like, I'm putting in more effort than I should be for a kid who just shows no interest in us. Then sure, yeah, you move on from that. But I don't think that's ego. I think that's smart strategy. But a kid, we've seen this where Notre Dame's led for kid, and then boom, he goes somewhere else. We've seen situations where another school led for kid, and then boom, Notre Dame is able to overtake it. It's about what happens at the end, not that's why I would say, recruiting is a marathon, not a sprint. And what that means is It doesn't really matter how you start. In a sprint, if you get a great start, you have a better shot at winning. Now, not always the case, as we used the example last week about Usain Bolt, but unless you're racing Usain Bolt or generational racer like that, you get a great start. You got a good chance of winning, especially if like in indoor, you're racing 55 meters. You get off to a rough start or a good start, you got a chance of winning. In a marathon, the best always, it's kind of like the difference between the NFL playoffs and Major League Baseball versus NBA. In the NBA and Major League Baseball, the best team usually kind of rises to the top by the end because it's a 7. You can come out and be down a couple games or, lose a game or two or lose 3 games and still win the series. If you have a bad day in the NFL and in the postseason, you're done. That's it. You're done. Same thing with NCAA basketball. You have a bad day, the best team doesn't always advance. The best team that day advances. In college baseball, you can start off and have a terrible opener and then win the next 2 and you're good. Move on. So, I think it's about where are you at the end? That's all that matters. You can stay behind the guy, stay behind the guy, stay behind the guy, but as long as you win on that last turn, and then you're good to go. Here's an interesting question from Rob Osgood. Rob asks, question about players who take their mission for 2 years. How do they keep in football shape while they're gone for 2 years? Well, honestly, that depends on where the mission is. So I believe like Kahuna Kia is in a mission in like Raleigh, North Carolina. There are gyms, there are fields, there are plenty of places to work out. Some kids will take their mission in like a third world country or somewhere where there's just not the access to nutrition, there's not the access to weight room, to fields, things like that. So if a kid wants to stay in shape, he'll stay in shape. That's just a given. Now, football shape's a different animal. You're going to not be in football shape right away. You don't stay in football shape. You stay in good physical shape. You make sure your diet's good. Make sure your nutrition is good. Make sure you're staying up on your cardio and things along those lines. Don't get bad weight. As long as you're doing that, the football part will come back. So, I mean, kids are taking missions in the United States and more developed countries. It's not that hard to stay in shape when you're doing that. It really isn't. Jason asks, how would you project Bradley Shaw versus a player like Jaden Osbury? Aren't they similar in size? All right, but what did I say, Jason? What did I say about Bradley Shaw? What's his game like? He plays like a middle linebacker. He's built like a rover. Okay. What's Jaden Osbury playing right now? Rover. Right? That's the difference. Jaden Osbury is also a much better athlete than Bradley Shaw. So he's longer. He's a different type of player. And I've said before, Jaden Osbury is the exception to the rule. He doesn't define it. So how would I project Bradley Shaw? He plays like a pure inside linebacker. Jaden Osbury is a guy that plays great in space, whether he's as a will, whether he's a rover. And now if he can fill out, I think he can play Mike. The difference is Jaden's longer, from what I can tell, than what Bradley is. And he's a much better athlete and plays a different style of game, which is why it works for him. Let's get to the next question. We got DMND13. Does Notre Dame try to strategically schedule public commits from kids who have given silence, or do they just let kids do it whenever? I'm thinking of the 5 commits in 5 days last summer. It's a little bit of both. Obviously, if a kid wants to commit, like on, I think it was Junior Tualamaka, committed like on his dad or mom's birthday or some family member's birthday. I think Christian Gray, the July 4th meant something for him. There was a reason he wanted to do it then. And so they'll be fine with it. For other kids, it's like, yeah, hey, you visited. Let's schedule your commitment. Like, okay, let's say 2 kids committed this weekend. And they say, okay, well, let's get some bang for your buck. Let's have your moments. Hey, maybe you go on Tuesday and then you commit on Thursday. So this kid can have Tuesday and then, can let a lot of the excitement go for a couple of days, and then you commit on Thursday, and then you can get excited, get the excitement and have your moment as well. And I think there'll be some strategy to that. But sometimes kids say, hey, look, I want to commit on my birthday, or I want to commit on my mom's birthday or my grandma's birthday or my dad's birthday or my brother who passed away's birthday, something like that. Then you'll let the kid do it that way. But if a kid doesn't have a specific, hey, this is when I want to do it, they'll work with them on trying to do it in a way where you get the most public impact and allow the kid to kind of get his moment. Because like you don't want to have 3 kids committing on the same day, because then by the 3rd commitment, nobody's talking about the first kid as much anymore. And so part of this is also helping those kids out to try to say, hey, look, you want to make sure that you're doing this in a time where you can have your moment, and then this other kid can have his moment, and then it's going to be rocking and rolling. So that'll be kind of how they do it. Let's get to another question here from Irish Blooded. Is not just as a Notre Dame coach, but what do you think of Manti as a college coach, personality and ability? I have no clue about his ability. I've never seen him in a coaching situation. I don't know if Manti has the ability to relate to players or not. I have no clue. I've never seen him in that situation. My thought would be that he would be a good coach just because of his knowledge of the game, the kind of player he was, and the personality. I think he's someone who cares about people and wants to help people and things like that. And I think there's certainly a place for that in coaching. You all know my stance on that. So in those areas, I think there's a lot of things about him that would fit really well as a coach. But as far as ability, I have no clue. Because look, not every smart or good player is a good coach. Look at Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan, arguably the greatest basketball player of all time, arguably. Certainly the best player of his generation, in my opinion. And I'm a Larry Bird fan, but I mean, I think Bird would tell you, I think Michael's the best player of this generation, at least that generation. Then he was terrible, not a very good coach. Magic was a terrible coach, and Jordan so far has been pretty much a disaster of a owner GM. Isaiah Thomas wasn't a very good coach or GM. Larry Bird was, but he's a bit of a rarity. You look at Major League Baseball. I mean, Mark McGwire didn't do much as a hitting coach, I don't believe. And we've seen some guys who are former great players that just aren't good managers. Being a great player doesn't mean you're going to be a great coach. So in that regard, I have no idea. I would just say that I think Manti has a lot of traits that would make me think he'd have a chance to be a good coach in time. So yes, I do. Now here's another question from Irish Blooded. Yes, what do you think of the reports, if true, about Colorado, the Big 12 versus Pac-12, and how that might affect prime time as a head coach? So I think the report I saw was that I think it was Colorado and Arizona are 2 teams that the Big 12 is targeting. I would love to see the Big 12 go after Colorado. I wish the Big 12 would go after Nebraska. I do. I would love to see some of those teams back in that league. I think it'd be great for Nebraska. I think this would be great for Colorado. I think getting Colorado back to where recruiting the Southwest and the South is more feasible. I don't know a lot of kids in St. Louis that are just dying to play in the Pac-12, and if they are, they're going to go to USC or Oregon, right? I mean, I don't know a lot of kids that are dying to play in the Pac-12, and if they are, they're going to go to USC or Oregon, right? I mean, that's just the reality of it. So I think going to the Big 12, it didn't make a lot of sense. They lost a lot of their longtime rivals. You get them back in the Big 12 now, some of their rivals are gone, but some of them are still there, right? I mean, Texas is gone, Oklahoma's gone, Nebraska's gone, but there's still some rivals there. There's still some of the old Big 12, Big 8, Southwest Conference influence there. So I would love that. I think it'd be great for the Big 12 if you're able to pull those 2 off. Because, again, what do we talk about? It's not about bringing in great programs. It's about bringing in TV markets. Getting the Denver market and then the Phoenix, Tucson, Phoenix market would also make a ton of sense to me. How will it affect prime time? Again, I think it gives him a league that's going to have more spotlight than the one he's in now, especially with USC and UCLA leaving. It gives him markets or recruiting markets that I think are going to be more favorable to him than what the Pac-12 is. You're going to be on more not 10 o'clock at night East Coast game times in the Big 12, which is good for him. So I think for him, if I'm him, I'm happy about this. I think it'd be a smart move for the program. I think it gives them a better chance to win. I think there's a lot of aspects about that would make a lot of sense. It would make a lot of sense. So, I mean, if it was me, I would, I'd be all for that one. I'd be all for that one. Next question from Seth Clark. I know it's early, but what do you think of Chris Burgess as a player, and what are Notre Dame's chances of landing him early? Seth, I don't know about landing him early. I mean, he's got some big time schools after him. I have not heard that Chris is in a early decision making process. I know Notre Dame likes him a lot. With a lot of 25 kids, there's still a lot of academic work to do. And I don't care what your GPA is, because there's a lot of courses that Notre Dame needs kids to take that you're just not going to have by the end of your sophomore year. And so it can get a little bit questionable in that regard, but I know they love him as a player, and he was at Irish Invasion yesterday. He was one of the guys that I wasn't able to go, as I said, but he was one of the guys that one of my sources who was there said had a great camp. So he's now made, I think 3 trips to campus. There's definitely an interest there. Is it enough to get him to decide early? That I don't know. That I'm not sure of. So we'll see how that one kind of plays out. But I do know they like him a lot for sure, Seth. DMND13 asks, what are your guess on how many kids from this past weekend's uncommitted visitors end up in the class? 3. I think now I'm not counting. If you're counting Bronte, I'd say 4, since he kind of showed up on Sunday. But if you're just talking about the ones that were here from Friday to Sunday, I'd say 3 of the 5 end up at Notre Dame. If you count Bronte, then I'd say 4 of the 6 end up at Notre Dame. That's where it is. Jordan Schreiber says, will CJ Carr be in South Bend for Carter Nelson? Do you know if they've met yet? I don't know the answer to either one of those, to be honest with you. I know that he's got Elite 11 coming up here soon, and I'm not quite sure. He's got Elite 11 coming up, and I think the 7-on-7 championship is coming up. So the Elite 11 is the 14th to the 16th, so he should be good there. I don't know when the 7-on-7 championship is. I know that if he doesn't have a prior obligation, he'll be there. So I don't know if they've met yet. I think it would be good for him. The reason I left him off the list earlier is because I haven't gotten confirmation he's going to be there, and I can't put a kid on the list if he hasn't confirmed with us that he's going to be there. And so yeah, that's kind of how I feel about that one. Ben Tarnowski asks, where do you see this class ending up if Notre Dame can close on some of their top targets, and where do you see it ending up if they can't? Look, I'll tell you what I think. I don't know where they're going to end up because I don't know. I have no control over how players are going to get ranked. For example, you look at Isaiah Canyon, right? What's the incentive now that he's committed if he doesn't take visits, which as of right now he doesn't plan on doing? If he doesn't take visits, what's the incentive for 247 Sports or Rivals to jump him up their rankings? Well, with Rivals, maybe it's just integrity, being right. I don't think 247 is that way. What would be their incentive for making? He's a 3-star right now. Him as the number 46 player in the state of Georgia. What's their incentive for moving him up into the top 100 like 247, like on 3 has him? There is none. So that's going to affect his ranking. And that's what happens with a lot of kids that Notre Dame and other schools. It's not just Notre Dame, but I've said this before. Some guys trying to make a kiss on the board, like, well, the recruiting rankings are right. Just look at Alabama. So, okay, what do you mean? Well, they get all these highly ranked kids, but I've pointed out over and over and over again that Alabama has a bunch of kids every year that don't become highly ranked until after they've either committed to Alabama or it's clear that Alabama is their leader. So were the rankings right? And my point being, if that kid would have somehow chosen Georgia Tech just because for whatever reason and not gone to Bama, would his ranking have reflected his talent? No, it wouldn't have. And so it's not the rankings were right. The rankings followed the kid's decision to go to Alabama. Then it came. And so that Notre Dame's not one of those schools right now that gets the benefit of the doubt from the recruiting services. They just aren't. So I don't know where it's going to end up being ranked, even if they close on everybody. I'll tell you this. So I've said earlier, Carter Nelson, Gearby Lambert, Kedron Young, Elijah Rushing, Justin Scott, Kingston Viliama Asa, Caleb Beasley, Bronte Johnson, Davis Andrews, Malcolm Ziegler, to me, are the must-gets. You can throw Oliver Miles in there. If you get most of those guys, for me, that's a top 5. I mean, I have a hard time feeling that there's going to be 5 classes better than that one. Just have a hard time with it. It's going to be balanced on both sides of the ball. You're going to have impact players on both sides of the ball. There's incredibly high ceilings mixed in there. There's some really high floors mixed in there. It's just the kind of class you can win a championship with. And you just followed up with a similar class a year ago. I don't know where it's going to be from a ranking standpoint. And honestly, I stopped caring. I just care about what do my eyes tell me. And I trust my eyes more than I trust those. And they should trust their eyes more than they trust mine. I mean, if a guy's watching our show and saying, well, Driscoll said this, let's move this, then he shouldn't be doing rankings. They should trust their own eyes. I just wish some of them would be more honest and maybe work a little harder to say, hey, where do I make mistakes? Like I've updated my recruiting rankings this year. I've kind of, with some of the upsides, I'm a little bit more picky with some of the upside grades because you start getting something like, well, every kid has a chance to pan out and be that guy, but let's be a little bit more, let's have some variance to so like not everybody's getting like like almost everybody the way I did in the past would have a higher upside grade than their current grade. So, that's not always true. And so just you alter it and it's based on results. And you always want to, like I've said, my grading system I came up with because at a lot of positions, because when I was missing in like one direction. I would miss on bigger guys almost always. And so you say, okay, especially like at receiver. So you've got to, if you're just ranking off of gut, then you're going to have those misses on your bias. You've got to if you come up with a grading system that fits your bias, then you're going to just play into your bias. You've got to be able to create a grading system that creates some balance that helps you to kind of protect yourself from your own biases. And that's what I've tried to do. And I think more people need to be willing to do that, in my opinion. All right. Let me see here. I don't understand this question. Patrick Fleming says, help us out with your recruiting ranking stance. Can you give us an example of a highly ranked player who was a bust and a poorly ranked player who's a gem? I don't understand your question, Patrick. What exactly are you asking? What's that have to do with my stance? I mean, there's a ton of guys who were highly ranked that were busts, and a ton of guys who were lowly ranked that became gems. If you tell me what you're trying to ask here, like why you're asking it, I'll be able to better answer. But I don't understand what you're saying by recruiting stance. So if you could just clear that up for me, I would appreciate that. But I mean, I could do a whole show on 5 stars who busted, a whole show, and I could do a whole show on 2 and 3 star kids who became great players. Somebody's in the chat said Justin Jefferson. It's a perfect example. Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase on the same receiving core. Jamar Chase was like, I think, a 5-star, highly ranked guy. Turned out to be great. Justin Jefferson was a 2-star. Turned out to be great. There's other 5-stars they've had. Malachi Dupree wasn't very good. So that's kind of you're always going to find that. So Patrick says, I think you're saying that rankings are at least partly driven by clickbait. But yeah, I'm very much saying that. Absolutely. Very much saying that. It's not every service is that way, but they absolutely do that. Look, we've been told in the past by players that this guy told me that if I only talk to him, he'll move me up in the rankings. I'm supposed to have respect for that group's rankings then? I know for a fact that a guy that has some say in the rankings at one of the major networks hates Notre Dame, and he's a petty person that lets his feelings influence the job that he does. Just it's a reality. I'm supposed to respect his rankings and think that it has something to do with it. And we see it all the time. Kids that are committed early and don't take visits don't go up in the rankings. Very rarely does that happen. Kids who are uncommitted all the time do that. That just follow it. I'm not pulling this out of my you-know-what, man. Just look at the rankings. I've pointed this out on the message board several times. Look at Alabama. I give you like half their class one year were kids that were ranked, top 150, 200, 3-star. And then they commit to Bama and they go up immediately. The very next ranking is like 100 spots. Based on what? There's literally no football being played between the time that they committed to Bama and got their rankings boost. No football was being played. None. So what resulted in it? They signed with Bama. So again, was that kid talented? Yeah. Did that kid deserve the ranking he got? In a lot of instances, yes. But is the ranking reflective of their evaluation? No, it's not. And there's just a lot of that. And there's a lot of it benefits us. I'm looking at it from their standpoint. It benefits us to have some of these uncommitted kids up in the rankings, because otherwise, what's the storyline? Or here's another one. If you're not moving kids around in the rankings, what's the point of doing 9 different recruiting rankings releases in the course of a year, which they will do? They'll do like 3 in the offseason when there's no football being played. Well, if you're just, hey, here's a new ranking and it's the same as it was before because there's been no football being played, who's going to click on the articles? Who's going to sign up for their sites? Nobody that is new is going to do that. And so, yeah, I mean, it's easy to follow. It really is. If you pay attention to it, and it's hard for some of you to pay attention to it because you have jobs and families and lives and all that. This is my job. So there's absolutely. And like I said, I know that there was personal biases with some people that were doing rankings of Rivals. They're not there anymore. So I'm willing to give Rivals a bit more of a, okay, let's see what you guys do. And give them a pass to prove themselves. Hiring John Garcia, smart move. I like John. I know John's going to be honest. Even when we don't agree, he's going to be honest. And so, because like I tried to talk John into putting Benjamin Morrison in the top 100. And he said, I like him, but I can't put him top 100 because of whatever. And he ended up being incorrect about that one. But no matter what his relationship was with me or how much he trusted me, he had to trust his own eyes. And, so he went with, I respect that. I respect people like that. And there just aren't enough of that out there, to be honest with you, Patrick, in my opinion. And so that's where I'm coming from. I don't know if that answers your question, Patrick. So if you can let me know if that answers your question or not, I would, I don't want to not answer your question. I literally didn't understand what your question was. So just let me know if I did. I think that's all the questions. Let me just scroll here real quick and make sure I didn't miss any. Here's one. Here we got a couple more here. We got one from Beezer 12 Washington Beard. Don't know if this has been addressed, but do you have any thoughts on the SEC not moving to a 9-conference game? I look, here's the deal. I don't have a problem. I want to make sure I'm clear on what I said last week. I don't have a problem with conferences going to 8 games. It used to be that way for a long time. You were only playing 7, 8 conference games because there weren't a lot of teams in your leagues. My issue with this is not that they have an 8-game schedule. It's that who they're playing in the non-conference. There are so many SEC teams that just play garbage non-conference schedules. They play like one good team and then a bunch of garbage. That I have a problem with. I have a problem with them not being willing to, more teams not being willing to do home and homes with other teams. The fact that Florida has not played a game above the Mason-Dixon line like decades. That's a problem for me. When I look at things like Alabama hasn't played up until Texas hasn't played a lot of home and homes. They play like one game neutral site field games, usually close to where they are. I can't stand that. So I don't particularly care for that. Somebody brought this up the other day. What would be smart? And I don't know if they can contractually do it. I don't know if they can, with their TV contracts can just move to 8. But if I was other leagues, I'd say, yeah, fine, we're just going to 8. Big 10, fine, we're just going to 8. Big 12, fine, we're just going to go to 8, and just do it that way. I mean, and then give yourself that. Because, there was I forget who it was that made this argument. It's like, well, the last, however, ever since the whatever teams moved to 9, the teams that have had 8-game schedules have won all the championships. As if that's like some, okay, yeah, you're kind of making the point. 8-game schedule, especially when you schedule soft non-conference games, is going to make it easier for you to run the table. You're not playing as many good teams. You're not getting the same wear and tear on your bodies when you're playing a FCS team in November. When other teams are playing, like Big Ten teams are playing league games the whole month of November. You're playing Mercer the week before your rivalry game. I think those are problems to me. If they were only going to play 8 and then they upped the value of what they were doing out of conference, I don't care. That's fine. Good. I'm actually a fan of more non-conference games. I would love to see more good non-conference games, partly because that's what I grew up on, because you had to. I mean, there wasn't as many Division I teams. You didn't have as many conference games, and so you had to play a lot of good non-conference games. I personally like to see that. I care more about that. The issue isn't just the 8. It's the quality of what they play outside of the 8. That is the problem for me. It's not true for all SEC teams, but too many is the problem. So good question there. So I'm going to end it there and got to wrap this up. I'm starting to lose my voice a little bit. And We had a lot of good questions. I hope I was able to get to most of those very, very much. Appreciate you guys getting those questions in. Well, tonight, 6 o'clock, Sean Stiers is going to have he's going to go live at 6 o'clock for the IB Nation Sports Talk. I'll be back tomorrow. Vince and I are going to have our next position preview, Notre Dame position preview, as we look forward to the 2023 season. Wednesday, I have another solo show. We're going to have IB Nation Sports Talk all night this week. We're going to have afternoon shows all week this week. Got a lot of fun stuff planned for you. Make sure you are locked in. Hit that like button, folks. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. Share this podcast. If you're listening via podcast platform, please give us a 5-star review. We'd greatly appreciate that. Got the merch store down below. Check out all of our cool merch. Sign up for the message boards. We would love to see your support of Irish Breakdown that way. But also, come on the board and engage. Let's have some conversation. I think it's a good place to talk. Just be willing to have your opinions pushed back on sometimes. And we need more smart people, more people willing to get into conversations and debate and have some fun. And I think you'll really enjoy it. So thanks everybody for being with us today. Have a great rest of your day. 6 o'clock tonight, IB Nation Sports Talk. Check out the updates we're going to have on the message board. Stay tuned in. We may have a couple extra shows this week. We'll have to see about that one. So you all have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you again soon. Thanks for joining me on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.